Київ же маленьке місто, і всі говорять.
Kyiv's a small city, isn't it? Everyone's buzzing about, oh, something hit over there or there. But when you come to your office, the rumors were already flying yesterday.
A healthy atmosphere is key. I can't let the enemy gloat over ruins, even though, as you know, plenty has hit us. No, everyone needs to know we're doing just fine.
Кирило Олексійович, дякую дуже.
Mr. Budanov, thank you so much for speaking with me. The last time we met was 2 years ago, and back then our interview was also strategic in scope. We discussed a rough sketch of events, and today we'll probably do the same, because the country is facing another Rubicon of internal and external threats. So, I'll start with this. On August 5th of 2020, a statement appeared on the official website of the President of Ukraine. The office of the president thanks Vasyl Burba, who served as the head of the main directorate of intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. He demonstrated high efficiency and professionalism, making a significant contribution to improving Ukraine's security situation. At the same time, the office of the president thanks Vasyl Burba, who served as head of the main directorate of intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. He demonstrated high efficiency and professionalism, making a significant contribution to improving Ukraine's security situation. At the same time, the office congratulated Kyrylo Budanov on his appointment to this position. The change was linked to the need for reformatting and intensifying work, adopting and implementing modern approaches to addressing security issues. But there's this statement on the president's website, and then there's a bigger picture of your arrival, because things weren't exactly rosy. You stepped in amid the massive Wagner scandal. You came in as President Trump was wrapping up his first term. You arrived with the Afghanistan operation a year away and a full-scale invasion 6 months later, knowing you had just a year and a half before the invasion. What would you have done differently?
Thank you. That's quite a philosophical question, I suppose. What would I have done? Most people in my shoes might say, I'd do everything better, more, pay more attention to certain things, but I wouldn't change a thing. We did what we did. I'm fond of a quote by Oscar Wilde. It might not perfectly fit your question, but to me it's relevant. In the original it goes, no man is rich enough to buy back his past. So everything we did, we did. It's history now and it is what it is.
В мене питання було.
My question was whether you can now say how long Ukraine and its partners worked to prevent the invasion and what channels were used.
Well, let's put it this way. Many countries tried first to fully understand the limits, the boundaries of the possible future actions of the Russian Federation. There were a lot of discussions about what they were capable of, what they might do and what they couldn't. There were many different opinions amongst our partners, so to speak. Again, most countries within their capabilities, let's call it that, because we need to look soberly at countries' ability to influence others, especially one as large, however unpleasant it is to admit, and powerful as the Russian Federation. Yes, many tried to do something, but in the end, it clearly didn't prevent the event we're all experiencing now.
Today, I'll often use the words strategy and strategic. Did our European and American partners strategically realize in 2022 that this war wouldn't stay local, that it would spread?
У 2022 році, що ця війна не носитиме локальний характер, що вона буде розповзатися.
You know, I can give my personal opinion. I think no. And unfortunately, I'm not sure that even now everyone understands what the consequences of this war will be, even after, I hope, it ends in the nearest future. But the consequences will be felt for many years in many corners of the world.
In one of your interviews, you said that, in your opinion, we're already in the Third World War scenario. I'll refer today to the Geopolitics Center of JP Morgan Chase, because its analytical service is considered one of the best in the world. Well, this service believes that a ceasefire in the Russia-Ukraine war will come as early as 2025. You recently made a nearly identical statement. This document, which according to the Geopolitics Center, will be made by both sides. What might it lead to? It will be far from ideal. It won't lead to comprehensive peace or a peace treaty, but it will definitely stop hostilities. Recently, the media reported several scenarios outlined by JP Morgan. There are 4, and they all lead to consequences. But there are reasons for both Russia and Ukraine to stop. because Kyiv isn't receiving aid from the United States on the scale it needs, and Europe can ramp up fast enough to supply Ukraine with weapons. Moscow faces enormous losses that are disproportionate to the meters they advance. And so, four scenarios. The most likely one, 50%, is a Georgia scenario, where Ukraine doesn't receive stable Western support, faces instability, slow post-war recovery, a disruption of European integration, and drifts back into the Kremlin's orbit. 50%. The second scenario, 20%, is Israel. This scenario implies strong and consistent economic and political support for Ukraine from allies, but without a significant presence of foreign troops. It's a scenario of turning the country into a fortress, a scenario of rapid military modernization.
That's what was called the Israelization of Ukraine back in 2023.
Yes, exactly. The third scenario, South Korea, is considered the most desirable for Ukraine right now. While the war doesn't foresee, for example, NATO membership or the return of occupied territories, if it's possible to secure the presence of allied troops in Ukraine and obtain the US guarantees, then 80% of the territory could live, develop, and have some security for those territories. The fourth scenario is Belarus. The US withdraws support, Europe doesn't step up, Ukraine, under Moscow's demands, becomes a vassal state, Russia wins the war, the West fractures, and the world order is irreversibly undermined. In which of these scenarios is Ukraine now? And what would you adjust if possible?
You know, these are scenarios for how events might unfold. First, we need to remember that these aren't dogma, just scenarios, options. These are JP Morgan's conclusions, and I think it's a serious organization whose opinion can't simply be ignored. You can do that, but it won't be entirely correct, right? Still, I'd like to shift you slightly to a different paradigm. The question isn't what might happen. I could even off the cuff throw out a few more scenarios with high probability that could exist and be achieved under certain conditions, but the question is different. What do we want to achieve for ourselves? If we can find that answer, it will be a bit easier for us. Obviously, the Belarus and Georgia scenarios are unlikely to satisfy Ukrainian society. The Israelization or South Korea scenarios are probably better, but again, it's a debatable question. I believe we need to think about how to live in the conditions we are already in, and think about how to preserve our statehood, our society, our culture, and our nation. And the hardest part in this situation will be thinking about how to take back what we've lost for a certain period. That's the main question.
Next, we'll talk about what this current stage of the war looks like, about weapons and the number of personnel this stage requires, and about a positional stalemate. That's a term from the former Commander-in-Chief, Mr. Zaluzhny, about a positional stalemate. Do you think that with technological advancements, when we often talk to fighters on the front during broadcasts, and they increasingly say there's a 10 to 15 kilometer kill zone where personnel rarely get through, should we call this a positional stalemate? Does it mean the war at this technological state is hitting a wall?
What I can tell you is that the war in its space has significantly slowed down. Yes, due to a certain technological leap initially, and now just technological progress, we can state that. But again, if we take as a basis that the technological solutions we've currently achieved, not the ones that could exist, but the ones we have right now, make it nearly impossible for personnel to operate, then we wouldn't be able to answer the question of how we're still moving forward somewhere, or how, unfortunately, the enemy sometimes moves forward. Clearly, technology at this stage of technological solutions can't fully replace personnel on the battlefield. And unfortunately, we have to admit that when we perhaps reach the stage of mass application of artificial intelligence with corresponding technological solutions and, so to say, terminators are fighting, maybe people won't be needed as much. But until that happens, unfortunately, the conventional soldier, as they say, will always be needed, and the outcome on the battlefield will depend on them.
You recently stated that Russia plans to spend around 1.1 trillion on rearmament by 2036. That sounds like the most ambitious arms program since the Soviet Union's collapse.
Not even since the collapse. It's the most ambitious program since 1980.
Alright, if the stars are lit, it means someone needs it. If this armament program is on such a massive scale, it means there's a purpose behind it. That purpose, let's say, is a vector of movement. It's Finland, Norway, the Baltics, Europe. In general, what is it?
Загалом, це що?
Відповідаючи на ваше питання,
In response to your question, I can note the following. This document, I know it very well. This document talking about 1.1 trillion. It's actually stated as, I believe, 90 trillion Russian rubles. This program's funding, translated for simple understanding, is what those numbers represent. So, the number one task outlined in this systematic document is to prepare the Russian Federation for war with NATO by 2030. That's exactly what these actions and budgets are aimed at. The bulk of the amount is to be spent by roughly 2030. After that, it'll taper off.
This spring, a piece by Surkov, Putin's foreign aide and ideologue of the one brotherly people nonsense, appeared in the French outlet L'Express. This man brought immense harm to our country. In that interview, he said Russia will expand as far as God allows.
Well, there we go. That's your answer about 1.1 trillion and the program through 2036.
At the same time, he predicts the collapse of the EU and NATO, analogous to the USSR and the Warsaw Pact, as a result of US-led perestroika policies. In your opinion, is there a threat of the Euro-Atlantic alliance and the EU collapsing due to an American perestroika? And what new alliances could give Ukraine a chance to survive in modern geopolitics?
You know, I can express a purely personal opinion. I don't fully believe in broad alliances. I believe they can exist, but only for a limited time. Really exist not nominally, but effectively function. I believe in bilateral relations. I believe, so to say, in alliances built on shared economies, mutual protection of interests, and joint promotion of imposition of interests. That's what I believe in. Commenting on Mr. Surkov's opinion, though I openly despise him for everything he has brought here, and much of this distorted abnormal ideologies he's doing, I'm afraid this is one of the likely scenarios if things stay as they are now. I'm not saying it's a 100% scenario, but it's one of the likely ones if nothing changes, if attitudes towards what's happening do not change. Because constantly closing your eyes, saying, well, we all sympathize, Russia's doing bad, Ukraine's doing great, but when no one takes decisive steps to not just prevent this, but change it at all, it pushes everyone towards uncertainty about the future of existing geopolitical structures.
So it's not just about an arms race, right?
No, the arms race is a derivative. All the issues are strategic, and these are the mechanisms for solving them. Look, the Russian Federation's rearmament program to 2036, with the focus on 2030 that you mentioned. It's not about making more tanks or better missiles, it's about being ready for that war by 2030. Everything else is secondary. For war, you need more tanks, better missiles, and so on. Strategic issues come first, not second or third.
Do you believe that, as a result of current events, a new Helsinki Agreement or a new Yalta could emerge?
In a literal sense, I think it's impossible for now. Figuratively, unfortunately, I think it could happen. The question is, who will be the people sitting at the table? That's an open question.
Це може статись. Питання, хто будуть ці люди, які будуть сидіти, це відкрите питання.
Did it seem to me, or are you saying this with regret?
Ні, вам здалось, насправді.
No, it seemed to you. I'm saying with regret that it's come to this, because in fact it would have been better to maintain even a fragile world order. It would have been better, in my opinion, to maintain even a brittle world order, not perfect, not as strong as many thought, but still the world order that existed before 2014, because that's when it all started. All the problems stemmed from there. And when the Russian leader says the root causes need to be eliminated, he's right. But he's probably thinking of something else. All the root causes were there. Maybe in his mind he believes it started even earlier. For us, it definitely started in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea. That's when it began. It didn't start in 2022, it didn't start in 2025, as many think. No, it did not start in the fall of 2024 either, as some like to think. It started then, 2014, when everyone silently watched the violation of the world order that existed and did
І
nothing.
нічого не зробили.
Тоді, з вашого дозволу,
Then, with your permission, I'd move to internal scenarios, because they're no less dangerous and no less important. And I'll latch onto JP Morgan's Georgia scenario, because in the Georgia scenario, what are these Georgia scenarios? In my view, as I understand it,
на мою думку, так як я його розумію,
Ну,
так?
питання грузинський
The question
сценарій.
is, are we talking about the Georgia scenario of fall-winter 2024, early 2025, or the 2008 version?
Варіант 2008 року. Тут
2008, звичайно.
2008, of course, Abkhazia, Ossetia, and the ousting of Saakashvili. That's what the Georgia scenario means to me, but it's not even about personalities, it's about the state itself. So it's about a state that, so to speak, was played by the US State Department and the Russian Federation. And in my view, this is my version of events, you don't have to take responsibility for it. In my view, the State Department simply handed Georgia to the Russian Federation, either by agreeing or by pushing Saakashvili to hold early elections. He's removed, Ivanishvili comes in. We're talking portraits to remind people of these events. Ivanishvili seemed like an oligarch, seemed like business. There was no hope for that. But he leads towards Russia's vector of influence on Georgia, which in fact manifested in the recent protest on Georgia squares and streets. I don't know if this is a period or an ellipsis in Georgia's story.
Чи це три крапка в історії з Грузією,
Це
але
точно.
Definitely an ellipsis, but not the end.
грузинський сценарій
That's how the historical scenario looks for Ukraine. Do you see it playing out?
проглядається.
As of now, no. Absolutely not. And it's impossible, because even if someone wanted to turn towards Russia now, it simply would not work. The events we see in our society confirm this once again. It's impossible now, but the question is what happens next. As I told you before, if we don't all change and start taking what's happening seriously, various things could happen, and not the most pleasant ones, as they say. Why didn't I fully agree? By my facial expression, you probably noticed with your statement about the 2008 events, you say there were two actors in this play, so to say. I disagree with you because above all there was also Georgia. No matter how you look at it, the events happened on its territory with its population, and so to say all the events concerned its state at the time and its choice of future. Who and how took advantage of it all, again a question for the country where it happened. You know, there are many countries, and I'll digress a bit. It might be an allegory, but a scary one. I collect stamps. I'm a philatelist. It's a hobby that emerged not too long ago, actually, and that's the whole problem, maybe 150 years at most. And it's clear that most stamps from the 1900s are in my collection from start to finish. So looking through my collection, periodically adding to it, I realized at some point that many of the countries whose stamps I'm looking at no longer exist. And that wasn't so long ago. All these talks about how a country can't just disappear due to this or that event, it's a lie. I can show you, by stamps example alone, about 20 countries, not somewhere in Africa far away, no, not so far from us, that existed and are gone. Even in Europe, probably about 7 countries definitely ceased to exist in that short period of time. And that's not as long as it seems. So we need to seriously think about what we're doing and where we need to go. We need to clearly define for ourselves that we won't let this happen, or it'll be imposed on us. So it's better to set our own strategic goal, who we are, where we're going, our place and role in this world, and then choose the tools we need to achieve it. Otherwise, we could just end up as the subject of another stamp, so to say. That's the allegory, if you will.
Тобто ви продовжуєте вірити в те, що Україна
So you still believe Ukraine will have a sovereign voice when the war ends?
в виході з війни
Україна точно буде мати суб'єкт.
Ukraine will absolutely have a sovereign voice at the war's end, no matter how much global players might wish otherwise.
Бачити різним світовим гравцям.
і ви
Do you
погоджуєтесь?
agree with me that unity is a sensitive, even painful issue?
It's critical. Think back to 2022 when society was at peak unity. Recruitment centers didn't need to mobilize people. They stormed enlistment offices, joined fighters, walked into military units, right like that, and headed to battlefield sometimes without even formal enrollment.
But you've probably thought about tools for unity.
That's such a vivid example of society's unity. And think about it differently. Look at the situation. If that unity hadn't happened at that moment, would we have made it to this day? As a military leader, I can tell you, no, we wouldn't have. It wasn't our military or military political genius that stopped it. No, it was our society that did it. All of us together. When we're united, we can work miracles. We really can.
А зараз що може бути таким інструментом єдності?
What could be a tool for unity now? How do you influence it?
Це багатошарове.
It's a multi-layered phenomenon, so to say. There is no single template, do this and that and don't do that. No. But what I can say is this. The main thing is to listen and respond to society's calls. Then unity will be maintained.
Кирило Олексійовичу, чи ви думали коли-небудь про...
Mr. Budanov, have you ever thought about life after this situation when you could...
I thought you'd say life after death.
No, not to that extent. Life when you could say go out with your wife, walk around the city without security, or have kids who could go to school without bodyguards.
Listen, I'm full of strength and energy. I'll handle everything, and we're not planning to stop. My task is to do the maximum for this country to make it great, majestic and great. Small results just do not interest me.
Я б хотіла ще поговорити з
I'd
вами
like to talk more with you about the strengths of power in the Russian Federation. You're definitely studying this, the strengths of power in the Russian Federation. I'm sure you noticed Starovoyt's assassination, because for me it's a significant moment. I noticed that deputy ministers attended his funeral, and that doesn't fit with the picture that if someone puts a bullet in their temple, or someone else does, and then people who were given power and position by Putin show up.
Well, I disagree with you. The Russian Federation by its structure is very different from Ukraine. You can't compare them. So in a situation where everyone even knows exactly who gave the order and who did what, maybe they were even witnesses, they'll come out with stone faces and play the role, just as it's written, so to say, in the protocol.
Це не говорить про...
Doesn't that indicate disunity, cracks in the Russian Federation power structure?
No, sadly, it's unpleasant to say and probably unpleasant to hear, but their system is quite robust and stress-resistant.
Як
І
здоров'я
стреса
Путіна?
витривала.
Як здоров'я Путіна?
Just like Putin's health?
Ні, здоров'я тут.
Well, his health is worse than his system. But even with the departure of the Russian state's leader, nothing will change that. They've built the system so that the next successor, at the very least, will stay within that paradigm, at the very least.
Знаходитись в тій парадигмі. І це як мінімум.
У 22-му році було...
In 2022, it was trendy in the information noise to discuss the successor operation. A lot of my colleagues talked about it. That was a thing. Is it still relevant?
Було таке.
Чи це все ще...
Oh, they are fully prepared. Everything's ready. The fact is that they change these candidates, time passes, all these events happen. That's the whole problem. It's all calculated conceptually. And a successor who, for whatever reason, comes to power now won't change anything in Russia. Everything will move as it has, with minor adjustments, but small ones. It's the system. That is the problem. It's always a problem for democracies versus totalitarian regimes. The system works there. Yes, often a totalitarian regime falls, but when it falls, not evolves. There were revolutions, turmoils, and so on. Look at North Korea, a clear example. When the totalitarian regime came in the 1950s, it's still there. And they systematically approach preparing successors. Kim Il-sung, Jong-il, Kim Jong-un, they'll be successor and it'll be the same. Nothing ever changes that. That's the strength and stability of the totalitarian system. One more thing I'll tell you. I've seen this a lot, so to say, firsthand in conversations with prisoners. In Russia, an entire class of people has grown up. Not a cluster, a class. They were born under President Putin, live under President Putin, and many have already died under him. They can't imagine another life. So their system, unfortunately for us, is quite stable.
Тоді я б хотіла поговорити про те, що...
Then I would like to talk about, among other things, what we can depend on militarily. Because recently I heard from the Russian bloggers that we need to break through to Transnistria and from there somehow break through to Odessa.
Давня мрія зараз...
An old dream that's unrealistic now.
What about Moldova's elections?
That won't affect the Transnistria issue or Russia's desire to carve out a corridor there. It's obvious to everyone that the Russian Federation wants to have more influence in Moldova than it does now. And it's already trying to take steps, and it will take many steps. What comes off it, we'll see, because we're not sitting still either. We'll see soon. The elections are just a few months away.
Побачимо. Скоро. До виборів лишилось кілька місяців, так що...
Тоді Білорусь...
Then Belarus, also our neighbor. There were claims they deployed a Reshnik there. Under what conditions might Lukashenko allow a Russian corridor?
Важке питання. Зараз він категорично це не
Tough question. Right now, he categorically won't agree to it and won't allow it right now. Ultimately, we all remember 2022 when what everyone saw happen. We just have to be strong and ready for anything. Then there won't be any surprises. It all depends on us.
Mr. Budanov, recently the main intelligence directorate or unknown drones or unknown missiles carried out quite a few operations on the territory of the Russian Federation, like the operation with unknown cyber specialists, like the Gazprom operation, like the operation on Crimean servers. Please tell me, when units like your service plan something, do you coordinate your actions with American partners, European partners, MI6? Do you have to?
Very rarely. If we were to perform actions that could strategically impact the geopolitical interests of certain parties, then we'd probably engage in certain dialogues with these parties. If it's solely our own issue, and it is solely our own issue, we work alone.
Has it become easier for the main Directorate of Intelligence to plan operations since President Biden was replaced by President Trump?
Ви досить так цікаво сформулювали питання.
You phrased the question in quite an interesting way. First, we are the intelligence directorate of Ukraine, not the United States. That's the first thing I'd like to say. We have our own capabilities. We use these capabilities, and we use the capabilities of our partners from various countries, yes, but our foundation is our own.
I closely follow what's happening in Central Asia and the South Caucasus. There's a growing Turan movement.
It's an old dream of many people. It's called the Great Turan Project. It's a geopolitical project.
Could Ukraine have an interest in it?
You know, if there's no Ukrainian interest in it, we'll lose ties with that entire region. We need to have an interest everywhere we want to have any kind of cooperation in the future. I mean, political, economic, financial, scientific, or military. There could be many options. If we're not somewhere, those markets are close to us. As simple as that.
When did the main Directorate of Intelligence scale up its operations so significantly, going far beyond Ukraine's borders?
Це нехай історики дають.
Let historians answer that question. My personal opinion, if you're interested, I think around 2021.
When it became interesting to you?
Мені це було цікаво.
It's being interesting to me my whole life. I'll repeat once again, I want to see Ukraine as a majestic and great state, not second-rate. And to have greatness, you have to expand your influence. Otherwise, others will expand their influence over you.
Can I provoke you with a question? Which state are you prouder of, the Ukrainian People's Republic or Kievan Rus?
Kievan Rus.
Thank you. The Global South, the Middle East, what changed for Ukraine after Israel's Seventh-Day War?
Well, that's a broad question. We could talk about it for a long time. I'd say that for others, it became clear during those events. The US undeniably reclaimed military leadership in the world at that time. They showed the whole world we can do this if we decide to. I can reveal, so to speak, moments that are little known to the public. Since it's already happened, I don't think it's some kind of a secret of mine. So, do you understand where Iran is located, right? On the globe, yes.
I don't mix up Iran and Iraq.
Вибачте.
Sure, sorry for that. So, Iran was bombed from US territory. It was done deliberately to show the world that Americans can do it. There were many options for striking from much closer territories. It would have been cheaper, economically easier, logistically, tactically easier, and so on, but they made a demonstrative move, maximally projecting power in one moment, B-2s just took off from US air bases, escorted the whole way by refueling tankers and fighters. They flew from the United States, bombed the targets in Iran and returned back to the United States.
A demonstration of strength?
It was a demonstration of strength. They could have landed anywhere, but they returned back there specifically. That's tens of thousands of kilometers. They showed the whole world that, if necessary, America can reach anyone, anywhere, and no one can do anything about it.
Did it affect Putin?
Well, it impressed him greatly, very much. Such things, frankly, probably no one had done before. And no one still can, let's be honest, and it was all done as covertly and professionally as possible.
So, while America is bombing Iranian nuclear facilities, nuclear silos, the Russian Federation signs an agreement with the Taliban, officially recognizing them. Sorry for such a convoluted breach. It cooperates with North Korea, it hires mercenaries from around the world, but I'm specifically concerned about Afghanistan. Do you not expect on the fields of the Russian-Ukrainian front Taliban fighters who know how to fight in dashes and wage that kind of field warfare?
Перебіжками і вміють воювати таку польову війну.
Масово не очікую це питання.
Not massively. This isn't new. The Russian Federation, before this recognition, tried to recruit the Taliban, but they're not going for it. They have a lot of, so to say, issues accumulated with the Russian Federation, so there's no threat in that regard right now.
Off the record, you said the world will never be the same again.
Ніколи не буде вже таким, як
Світ
раніше.
змінився.
The world has changed. Those dreaming it'll return to pre-2014 and chasing fantasies. The world is different. We must adapt, find our place and role in this new world and fight for it.
Своє місце і роль в цьому новому світі. І виборювати.
Does that mean, for example, that the Ukrainian political landscape also needs changes and might change?
Yes, if the whole world has changed. You understand? I'm not just talking about politics, I'm talking about the world in general. Everything has changed. What was normal before 2014 no longer works. The world has moved towards strength. A strong world, if you will. There's less and less room for the weak in this world. Ultimately, if you want my personal opinion, there'll be no room for the weak at all soon. So we either become strong or we simply cease to exist.